Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of our podcast, The Deep Talks. So, today our guest is Smooth Deep. You might know me as ex-patient from our previous projects. So, a lot of people who meet me, they ask me, where is Smooth Deep? Is he in Bosnia? Is he in England? Is he in London? Is he in Sarajevo? So, Smooth, how are you and where are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad right now. I'm in London, England, or specifically Edmonton, which is my hometown in North East London, to be exact.
Okay, so question on the minds of many people is how did you deal with the lockdown? How did you deal with COVID-19? How's your health?
I would say my health in general is fine. It's great. Well, great. That's maybe exaggeration, but it's good. Like I've been, actually took the opportunity of the lockdown to get back in shape, should I say? That's why I used it to because it was, let's say, something that I was neglecting, and I've always been an active, a sportsman essentially when I was young.
Many people ask about that as well. So
People what?
uh, many people were asking like, you used to be slim, now what happened?
There you go. So yeah, I took an opportunity to get back in shape. I mean, I've also I've gained muscle mass, so I don't think I'm necessarily going to be that slim again, but I'll be in better shape. Other than that, it's been a quite tough period. I think as has been for a lot of people. Those as you know, and those who know me well, or those who follow me, would know. With my mother passing recently, and during the lockdown, she was in the nursing home. And I think I've spoken to a lot of other people who were in similar situations where they couldn't see family, especially family who were in need. So that was probably the hardest part of the whole lockdown for me. Um, but I've got through it. I've come through the other end, and you know, I wake up in the morning. I see the sunrise, so I'm grateful for that.
Okay, so I mean, we continue with serious topics. So, uh, what shook whole globe and what is still the main topic, although some people are saying it's going away, is definitely a murder of George Floyd under U.S. Police Department. Uh, how do you see that, and what does it and for what was it catalyst for?
Well, anybody who saw the video, regardless of what their political leanings are, there's no way they can say that wasn't an egregious killing. Like it was. So I think everybody can agree on that. I certainly view it as that. Um, and as you've seen, it's been the catalyst for the Black Lives Matter movement, particularly. But in a more general sense, it's been a catalyst for people questioning the system, um, people questioning the way the police is run specifically, and we saw the statue coming down in Bristol, which was which had a direct correlation to the death of George Floyd, or the murder of George Floyd, to be exact. Um, that was a direct reaction to that event. And as I said on Facebook a few days ago, when the USA uh, sneezes, Britain catches a cold, or when the USA coughs.
Exactly, exactly.
So relation between the George Floyd murder, and that was the catalyst for all these statues that you're seeing coming down now, which started with the one in Bristol, UK.
Okay, so you mentioned statues being torn down. in the UK as well as in United States, and we're gonna talk more about differences and grievances between the movement. However, what's your stance on the statues? Should they be removed? Should they be destroyed? Should they be put in a museum? Maybe something like they have in United States Jim Crow Museum. So, what's your take on the statues and its significance, or maybe insignificance?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite a, I won't say complicated, but it's a complex situation. There's loads of layers to it. So I'll start with the statue that came down in Bristol. I agree with it 100%. I don't necessarily agree with the way it was taken down, but I agree that it should have been taken down. When you start to do more research, you can see that actually the Bristol Council, which is the local government, they there had been petitions sent in to the Bristol Council over like a 3-year period. People wanted this statue to come down, and the Bristol Council refused to take it down. And then, after the George Floyd murder, people just felt that energy, that enrage inside them, and they tore it down. So, me personally, I don't necessarily think like the statues need to be destroyed. They could be kept in a museum, but then again, museums are also now under attack in the sense of Sadiq Khan, the London, for example, he's the mayor of London, has put out a statement saying that Tate Modern Museum is under review. So he's even considering closing down Tate Modern Museum, which personally I think is a step too far. I think certain statues need to come down, but I don't think everything needs to be ripped down, because how far do you go? We're going to burn Buckingham Palace? I mean, if they've been a historical, symbol of racism, if we're going to be real. So I think there are monuments that should come down, but before we make that decision, we should look at them in context before we actually make a definite decision of what comes down and what's going to stay. I mean, I don't know if you heard of, for example, I don't know if you heard of the Mahatma Gandhi statue in outside the University of Ghana in Accra. So Accra is the capital of Ghana, and the University of Ghana have taken down the statue of Gandhi. Because
For what reason?
I don't know if have you ever heard any of the statements that Gandhi said to about black people?
I mean, I cannot remember.
So there's
but
one that's in my mind.
Knew that.
Gandhi said,
Yeah.
Indians are infinitely superior to blacks. That's one quote from Gandhi. So and his statue was in front of the University of Ghana. So I'm 100% and I'm 100% for them taking down the statue of Gandhi in that context. And they took it. They didn't. It wasn't like the one in Bristol. They didn't rip it down. It wasn't a mob. They didn't throw it in a river. People got together. The local council got together. Local authorities from the university agreed, and there was some people within the community came and removed it. They removed it. I don't know what they've actually done with the statue, but that's how I hope or I wished the statue in Bristol would have been taken out. But then again, on the flip side, the people of Bristol have been campaigning to get it taken down. So at the same time, I do understand that people were just enraged and ripped it down.
Do you think maybe there would be possible to keep certain statues, but also with description on them, explaining their infamous roles, and maybe to also, as some people are commemorating certain important dates, they should also commemorate some important dates that are uncomfortable, and bring school children to see and to learn and to know even from those infamous examples.
Yeah, no, that's exactly my point. Why I said I don't necessarily think that they all need to be destroyed. Um, because I mean I don't I'm not I've heard the argument that if they get taken away we're going to forget the history. I don't agree with that. I think that's again another step too far. So this is something that we talked about before, where this is a thing where people on the right and people on the left are so concerned with keeping up their own narratives rather than getting to the truth and coming to a compromise. So the same way I think statues don't need to be ripped down and just completely demolished, I also don't think that they need to be kept up to preserve history. That's also a point that's just too far being made like by people who are on the right and people on the left thinking, okay, we need to just destroy everything. Both of those points are just too far. So yeah, I think there can be a compromise. In short, there can be a compromise made where, okay, we're gonna take this down, but we're gonna place it, if not a museum, like a park or something where kids can come and look at it and look at the in its actual context. See, the problem with to go back to the first statue that came down in Bristol, is he was being the statue was there celebrating his philanthropy, which is the guy paid for a lot of the buildings in Bristol. That's a fact. The guy helped build up the city. That's a fact. The issue is how he did that. He did that on the back of slavery. The money he made through slavery. So, is he a key figure of the city? Whether we like it or not, we have to say he was. There would be no Bristol City without this guy, or at least it wouldn't exist in the way it does today without this guy. So, I think he's not somebody that should be celebrated, but he's certainly somebody who should be in the history books. We have to. His existence has to be acknowledged. He just doesn't need to be celebrated.
So basically, this reminds me of when I was in Holland, and the tour guide was saying how Dutch and Indian had a really great trade cooperation, which is sugarcoating that there was colonialism, that there was spice trade and all of that, and that it wasn't as nice as they try to present it. Because when you say great trade and cooperation, you think both sides are equal. However, when you actually learn the history, you see that it wasn't equal. For example, this reminds me of one line where it's as like you say that we are part of Commonwealth, but where wealth isn't common. And I think that really illustrates these notions and these opinions of celebrating and sugarcoating dark past of many colonial powers.
How you put it there is perfect. That sums up the whole issue with the Bristol statue. It was a sugar-coated perception of this man. It wasn't up there like, oh, look at this guy, he was a slave. No, it was look at this great man who built up the city. Okay, that is one part of what he did, sure. But it cannot be ignored. The way he did it, the manner in which he did it, cannot be ignored. So I think that was the issue. That is the crux of the issue.
For example, I would also give contemporary example. I mean, no one says that Pablo Emilio Escobar was a humanitarian. Everyone knows him as a kingpin, as a drug lord, whatever it may be. No one will say, oh, he was humanitarian, he built schools, football clubs, etc.
While we're on the statues, one other point which you've probably seen me make on social media is about the Winston Churchill statue.
I wanted like which statues should be removed, which shouldn't, because I noticed you were mentioning that, so I would like to know your take on it.
Like, for example, the Winston Churchill statue is an example of a statue that, personally, I have no problem with it being up there. I mean, if they take it down, they take it down. I don't feel strongly either way, to be honest with you. Because Winston Churchill, was he a racist? He was a racist. But I'm also not going to... I'm not also not going to deny the fact that he was the guy who led Britain through the war and all of that. Sure, he did all of that. He did a lot of other things that are just outlandishly, discriminative as well. But this is what I was saying. Context needs to be given. We're in Britain at the end of the day. We're in Britain. Like, I understand why he's viewed as a British hero at the time, the era he lived in. I'm not saying that there were people in his own administration who looked at him and was like, "Wow, this guy is he's crazy. He's a racist." There were people. So I'm not going to say that everybody thought exactly the way Winston Churchill did. But it would be fair to say that the majority of Britain was racist at that time. That's a fair comment. So it's not hard to understand why he was seen as a hero after, for what he did for the war efforts. I mean, as soon as the war was ended, he got voted out of office anyway. Even the soldiers voted him out of office because he made a lot of decisions that were reckless. That's putting it nicely. But basically, he put winning the war above people's lives. Essentially, a lot of the tactics he did risk even a lot of British soldiers' lives. So, but even after all of that, the British government decided to make a statue of him, and we're in Britain. So it's like the Mahatma Gandhi statue coming down in Africa, in Ghana. The reason why I completely agree with that is, how do you have a statue of a man? Yeah, Gandhi did good things and all that, fantastic. But you have a statue of a man who said Indians are infinitely superior to blacks at the biggest university in Ghana. That doesn't make sense. But Winston Churchill, who was the war hero of Britain, having a statue in Britain, that does make sense to me. So for me, I'm willing to, I'm not going to say overlook his racism, but I'm willing to accept him as a figure for what he was, for good and bad. I'm willing to accept that, me personally.
Okay, so let's get back to Black Lives Matter movement. So first of all, tell me, what are the structural differences between Black Lives Matters movement in United States and Black Lives Matters movement in UK?
For me, I've been saying this for a while. For me, the movement is a bit messy in the way the general message is being put out. So essentially, you have Black Lives Matter in the US, the original, and now they have chapters all around the world. And a lot of people don't. I spoke to my best friend the other day about this, and he was unaware that there's a Black Lives Matter movement and there's an organization. And I think this is where it's becoming an issue, because a lot of people don't seem to know that. And again, me personally, looking at the organization, for me, it's there's a lot of red flags in what the agenda of the actual organization is. There's a lot of red flags for me. The first thing I would ask black people, or people in general, is, do you consider yourself to be a Marxist? If your answer to that is no, then that's even a starting point to ask yourself whether you whether you actually support the organization itself opposed to the movement. Because the two women who run the organization have openly said that they are trained Marxists. So, and they're, in terms of, to answer your question directly, in terms of the difference in structure, it's hard to see. To be honest with you, from what I can see, the Black Lives Matter UK just seems to follow whatever the Black Lives Matter US does, and again, and that's another mistake, because although our situations are similar, they're not exactly the same. So that's something, to use one of the most popular words at the moment. That's something that is quite problematic. The fact that it seems to me that the Black Lives Matter movement UK is kind of just, okay, this is what's happening in the US, we're going to do it over here.
So, what are the differences between grievances of uh, black people in United States and black people in United Kingdom, or I would expand it uh, in the European Union? Like, what are the challenges that people face? Are there the same problem? Are there different problems? And uh, do you face the same persecution and racism?
What I said with Black Lives Matter UK versus Black Lives Matter US, um, there are similarities and there are differences. I think in terms of the general discrimination, a simple way to put it is, um, we face the same type of discrimination, but in the UK to a lesser degree. So yes, there's police brutality in the UK, but not all officers are armed in the UK. So it's not gonna be the same level. You know what I'm saying? So yes, there's systematic discrimination in the UK. It's whether it's the, I mean, it would be hard to measure if there's. I would argue there's more in the US, just because, I mean, the US is bigger, and laws change from state to state. So again, that's something that's very hard to measure in a like for like manner. But to answer the question in a broad way, we face the same discrimination to a lesser degree, and we face similar issues generally. But like one thing that's specific to the UK is, and this started way before the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, or I can't say way before the Black Lives Matter movement, but before the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, should I say, is people from the Caribbean, largely Jamaicans, but the Caribbean in general, who are caught from the Windrush era. So this is or at least who descend from people who came during the Windrush era, which was an era where Britain needed people to rebuild the cities in the UK after the war. So they brought over loads of Jamaicans, Indians even, and at that time, like, people from the Caribbean were not considered immigrants because they were part of the, Jamaica didn't have its independence, for example, so they were part of the wider colony. So they didn't need visas or whatnot to come here. They could just come. Jamaica got its independence. Loads of the Caribbean states got their independence, and there was obviously something that needed to be done with the paperwork now that wasn't done. I would argue that was purposefully ignored, and so these certain paperwork wasn't amended to the point where now people who had originally come here as extended citizens were now technically illegal immigrants, and people have been quietly being deported over the last couple of years, and then somebody put the red flag uh, on what was happening, and it became like a widely known issue to the point where second, third generation. So we're talking about British-born Jamaicans were getting deported out of the UK based on the fact that their grandparents were now technically illegal immigrants, and they, you know, were essentially here because of their grandparents. So yeah, that's a whole. You know, I could go deep into that, but basically that is one issue that black people, specifically people from the Caribbean, are facing in the UK, which is, I mean, there's a significant population in Jamaican population in the US as well, but they're not facing that same situation.
So, were there any initiatives, any laws that were passed to maybe ease the situation or challenge the police brutality? Because, for example, uh, we see that certain laws are passed in the U.S. How was the situation in the U.K. before and now? Did something change?
So there was a law years ago. Is it 10 years ago? I know a long time ago there was a law put in place, um, uh, and I believe it's not in place anymore because it didn't work. And I don't understand how the British government thought it was going to work. But there was a law put in place some years ago. I can't remember what the name of the law was, but the reason I know the law was because I know a couple of people who were working for the police at the time, and so the law basically stated in order from a certain, it was early 2000s. I can't remember the exact year, but so from what a specific year in the early 2000s, they had put a law in place that you could no longer join the police unless you could prove that you had heritage outside of the UK stemming back to at least a great grandparent. So if you could trace back to a great grandparent and you still couldn't find heritage outside of the UK, you weren't allowed to join the police. And that also meant that people who were already serving police officers couldn't get promoted. So, for example, someone that my cousin grew up with was in the police at the time, and he just passed his detective exam just before this law was put in place. Like a few weeks later, and he wouldn't have been able to make detective. And I didn't agree with that law at the time, but I mean I understood what the logic was behind it. I understood. Oh, you know, but the point was like, okay, I guess the thinking was, oh, if we say that we block, I guess, quote unquote, white Anglo-Saxon people from getting in, we're only gonna get somebody who at least can trace ethnic minority heritage in their background into the police, and then that will make the police as a whole more diverse. I guess that was their thinking. The reason it didn't work is because there was already a bad relationship between ethnic minorities and the police. So regardless of that rule, people didn't want to join. Black people didn't want, Asians, whatever, black people, they didn't want to join regardless. And on top of that, I just don't think you can fight. I don't think you can fight discrimination with discrimination. That doesn't make sense to me. You can't. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because the white police officers or white people who wanted to apply for the police, who felt hard done by at the time, I 100% understand why they did. Like I said, I don't think you can fight discrimination by then being discriminatory. I don't think it works.